Immigration, the act of coming to live permanently in a foreign country.
When did you come to the United States?
When? 1949.
1949?
Yeah.
Why did you come to the United States?
My dad, he sent for me.
Why?
Well, just leave Italy, come over here in the United States, leave it with him, I guess.
Why did he come to the United States?
He was over here working, I don't know.
Do you know where he was working?
He was working the railroad, same
Railroad?
place I'm working, yeah.
Here in Washington?
Pasco, yeah.
How long did it take to cross the ocean?
10 days.
10 days?
10 days, yeah.
Was it expensive?
What?
Was it expensive?
Oh no, my dad, he pay everything. My mother and I, mom and I, what with me, see, we both come over here to the United States. Yeah.
Where did you come from in Italy?
Huh?
What city did you come from?
Barbarossa.
Where
That's the name of the town. That's the state, like the state of Washington. It was a Cosenza. That's a Calabria.
Where is that in Italy?
Where it was in Italy? On the hill of the Boots.
Oh, on the boot.
And the Boots, yeah.
Many were peasants getting pushed out by Europe's Industrial Revolution, or seeking relief from a lack of economic opportunity. Many were still pushed out of their homeland. They explored a new land and went to take up new jobs that usually required hard labor unless they had an education, which was rare, like working on a railroad, farming, mining, and more. Most coming to America were from Southern and Eastern Europe and tended to be Catholic or Jewish. They were poor, unskilled, and knowing no English. Their habits and culture were very different from native-born Americans. Others, known as birds of passage, wanted to come to America temporarily for money with the intention of returning to their homeland. Many were pulled here by contract labor agreements offered by recruiting agents, known as padrones to Italian and Greek laborers. After the Depression of the 1890s, immigration jumped from a low 3.5 million to a whopping 9 million. When the immigrants came to America, some may have sold everything they owned to get a ticket for their family to cross the ocean. They exchanged their belongings for money. Once in America, they had to get settled in their new home. They taught Americans their culture, and the Americans taught them theirs. They learned what Americans ate, did for fun, and how they acted. The Americans acted different from what the immigrants were taught back in their home in Europe. The immigrants also encountered many new people in cities. Some of the people they encountered were rude and did not like immigrants. Even though immigrants were insulted and often picked on by Americans, they still did their work. They worked because they had to help their family. Sometimes fights and riots broke out because some immigrants got tired of all the hate towards other immigrants. Immigrants helped out the American economy. They worked even though they were picked on. Without immigration, some of America's greatest achievements would not have been built. For example, the Transcontinental Railroad would have not been built. 80% of the workforce that built the railroad were immigrants, so that means 20% of the workforce would have had to build it themselves. That would have taken a long time. After the Civil War, the average New York City employer was making about $541 because immigrants were working. Many of the mining plants would have had a lack of workers. Many immigrants went to work for them. Also after the Civil War, immigrants went to work on farms because the slaves were free.
Immigrants entering the United States who could not afford first or second class passage came to the processing center at Ellis Island, New York. Built in 1892, the center handled some 12 million European immigrants, herding thousands of them a day through the barn-like structure during the peak years for screening. For the newcomers arriving without family, some solace could be found in the ethnic neighborhoods populated by their fellow countrymen. Here, they can converse in their native tongue, practice their religion, and take part in cultural celebrations that help ease the loneliness. Most industries offered hazardous conditions and very low wages. Urban housing was overcrowded and unsanitary. Many found it very difficult to accept. An old Italian saying summed up the difficulties felt by many. I came here to America because I heard the streets were paved with gold. When I got here, I found out three things. First, the streets were paved with gold. Second, they weren't paved at all. And third, I was expected to pave them. In spite of the difficulties, few gave up and returned home. Between 1900 and 1915, more than 15 million immigrants arrived in the United States. That was about equal to the number of immigrants who have arrived in the previous 40 years combined. In 1910, 3/4 of New York City's population were either immigrants or first-generation Americans. At the same time, the United States had difficulty absorbing the immigrants. Most of the immigrants chose to settle in American cities, where jobs were located. As a result, the cities became ever more crowded. In addition, city services often failed to keep up with the flow of newcomers. Most of the immigrants did find jobs, although they often worked in jobs that most native-born Americans would not take. Over time, however, the immigrants succeeded at bettering their condition. In the 1950s and the 1960s, many people felt that the old immigration laws were not fair. Businesses also needed more workers. In 1965, the government passed the Immigration and Nationality Law. These laws changed quotas and allowed more people to immigrate. Relatives of people who were already in the United States could join their family members. People with valuable skills could also come. In the late 1900s, many refugees left their countries to escape war, persecution, or hunger. President Jimmy Carter said, "It was a simple human duty to help them." Many immigrants came to the United States because they saw it as a land of freedom. They often built communities with other refugees from their home country. Their lives were hard. Still, they added to the economy and the culture of the United States of America. In the 1920s, Congress passed laws to limit immigration. The government used quotas. The quotas limited the number of people that could immigrate. The total number of immigrants dropped to 240,000 a year. The government gave each country a quota. Some countries, such as England and Germany, had higher quotas. Other countries, such as Italy and Spain, had low quotas. Few Asians or Africans were allowed to enter the country. The main attraction of the United States for the early immigrants was the abundance of cheap or free land. Most of this had gone by now, and the main desire was for the high wages being paid in the industrial cities. In 1910, 3/4 of the population of New York, Chicago, Detroit, and Boston consist of first and second generation immigrants. In the end, immigration helped out our great American culture, our great American history, and our ancestral backgrounds. Without immigration, many high labor jobs would have not been accomplished.